that was my input to the term sheet. This is my side of the story. I'm sure there are other parts of it too, but like that's my hook in the deal is like we went back to GM and said like, hey, this we're interested in an investment. This IP thing doesn't work. Like if you want this kind of IP, you need to buy us. And then GM was like, well, let's talk about that. And that was kind of like, whoa, we did not anticipate that being real. It was kind of a straight comment like, oh, if you want that, like you got to buy us. Like you bought the companies. We are the IP and you're buying it with an investment. You're going to have to actually buy the company. And they said yes. Um,
Wow. What a
so
story. Welcome back to CZ and Friends, where we talk with legal leaders, technologists, and operators shaping how modern companies work and scale. I'm your host, Cecilia Zaniti. Today, I'm joined by Matt Gipple. Matt started his career in big law, moved in-house, and became general counsel of autonomous vehicle company Cruise during a period of massive growth. He also, at the time, was actually my boss, and I learned a whole lot about product counseling, being a general counsel, innovation, and working in regulated spaces from Matt. Then he made a pivot that a lot of lawyers, a lot of folks listening probably are going to be inspired by. But basically, he became a founder. Today, he's the co-founder of Dryvebox, which brings golf everywhere through mobile technology-enabled experiences across the U.S. and Canada. It's been super fun to read his investor updates from the other side. So this conversation, so excited to talk with Matt. Been wanting to have him on the podcast since I started. It's going to be about moving from advising to deciding, leading through ambiguity, building when the answers are not obvious. Matt's going to be super humble about it, but essentially the rules on autonomous vehicles in California, he basically kind of wrote them. So it's super exciting. We're going to dive into that. Matt, it is so great to have you.
yeah, thanks for having me. And looking forward to seeing what we get into today.
Awesome. Let's go. So you started off in big law. You were at Latham and Watkins, and then basically you got a phone call. What happened?
Yeah. I went to Latham and then I was clerking and I had every intention of going back. I liked it there. I was doing antitrust. It was interesting stuff. Remains interesting. Um, but it's like always relevant. I didn't realize that when I got interested in it. But anyway, yeah, my friend Kyle had started this little company. Like literally he was living in San Francisco and he had a garage as one does, or some people in San Francisco do. And he's like, you gotta come look at these robots I've been building. It's like, okay, sure. Kyle's been building robots forever.
And by the way, Kyle Vogt, the founder
Yes,
of
right.
Cruise.
I'll vote. And he was like, you know, I started this self-driving car company and my investors keep asking me these legal questions and I don't want to answer them. I don't know how to answer them. They're kind of annoying. Can you come answer these questions for me? And I said no, because that was like high risk. I don't like, no, I have a nice thing. You get a bonus when you go back to Latham from clerking, like all makes sense. Um, and yeah, he worked on me a lot. And just like eventually he's like, look, if you come do this, like what's the worst thing that happens? It fails. And then next year Latham takes you back and then you're better. And that worked. I was like, oh, that's a good point. So then I said yes. And the rest is history.
So you basically join what would become, really a true innovator in autonomous vehicles on faith and on convincing from Kyle. So what was it like walking in that first day and you've got these basically sounds like souped up, it was Nissans at the time, I don't remember, but anyway, souped up cars, and you're like, all right, let me pull out some case law, or like what did you do?
Yeah, it was. So to be fair, Kyle, like he's always been like the guy who was gonna do big things. And at that point, they had just sold he just sold to Amazon. Twitch just sold Twitch to Amazon for, $1 billion or whatever. So it was like not that large of a leap of faith. Like he's already the Midas touch character. But I was more or less oblivious to this. Like I knew about these things, but I wasn't like in tech. But yeah, like even growing up, like Kyle's this achiever, so it wasn't that big of a leap. But yeah, like you go from law firm to clerking, like pretty structured, pretty known environments, to like it was 25 people in this modified house that happened to have a garage because we have cars, and Cruise had just, they started out with, they were going to do a highway autopilot, um, and changed between me saying yes and starting, they changed. So like, I didn't know that until the day I showed up. I was like, oh, full self-driving. Got it. And they had a gem, like the golf cart, the fancy golf carts,
Hmm.
as well as a Nissan Leaf at the time. And it was like, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna do low speed, people moving type stuff? Or are we gonna do full on self driving everywhere? So, what did I do? California's regs had just, like, the first wave of them had just come out, and we were deciding, like, do we need to apply for one of these? And it wasn't clear that you did, because like one could argue you don't, because you can make a bunch of different, you can put some things together to say you don't need to. And that was kind of my first thing, was like, hey, do we need to get one of these permits? Um, and decided that we did. And then the next year was, how do you, one of the big parts of the California regime was reporting accidents, which is fairly clear, and then these takeovers. Um, and like, what counted? It was not clear. No one had reported before, and we all had to report the first time. And there were like 7 companies doing it, 6 or 7. Like Mercedes was in at the time, Tesla. Tesla reported none. Waymo or Google at the time was doing it, and we like all, everyone else landed like fairly close to the same manner of figuring out what to report. Tesla reported 0. So, but no one ever said, or as far as I know, has said like what counts for them. So that was an interesting endeavor, trying to figure what would count for us.
So in that process of this ambiguity, so this is like a law school hypo. Like literally, what is is the official term is disengagement, or what was the official term? Okay, so what is a disengagement? So I happen to drive a Tesla now. So now we've got the benefit of hindsight because we're what is it, 10 years later, or maybe 8 years later, and uh, well, I'm gonna admit that I turn on self-driving, and when it yells at me, it's like, "Look at the screen." I turn it off because I know that if you get yelled at twice in one drive, it will turn itself off. So I guess I'm gaming the system. But going back to actually being, a lawyer for this, how did you do it? So did you literally, like, pull up the regs? Did you call the regulators? And is it, what is the standard that you apply? Like, I mean, I know what I would do, but is it something like, okay, what's reasonable? What's the goal of this regulator? Like, give us, a lot of our listeners are in product counseling. I would consider this to be product counseling, on hard mode. What frameworks did you use at the time? And then maybe you can get into what you learned over the course of working at Cruise.
Yeah. So, and I don't remember perfectly, so I'm gonna remember what I remember. Like, you kind of do the like legislative history work where you look at when they were making the reg and what was talked about. So I did that. Uh, it was the building of that. So you started, you're like, oh, Matt wrote the reg. Like Google, they tried to get a law passed, like in 2011-ish. Eventually got some things done that led to these regs coming out from the DMV. And so there's a couple guys at the DMV who wrote like they wrote them. They were tapped. There's a story published about this. Like they were doing something at the DMV, I don't remember, and they got tapped to like build the regs. And really at the time, Google was the only one, like giving input as to like what this was about, educating them. And I think, they did a pretty good job, being the first out there. Anyway, so they did that, and I looked at this history, and then they were taking comments on the future iterations of these regs. There were like 3 tiers or 2 tiers that needed to come out for testing, and then testing without drivers, and then paying without drivers. Anyway, so I did like get involved in some of that. Um, but yeah, I looked at the history. I didn't, I, I definitely called, I think his name's Brian. I can't remember, but I like had his phone number at the DMV, and I had called him for other purposes, but not to ask him like, hey, what am I supposed to do here? Um, then at I think in other places, you may have industry groups where, like, you can get together and talk about it. That was not the case here. It was still too early, like, no one really wanted to share what was going on. Um, Another piece which is, like, relevant is, like, what kind of company are you? So, like, you knew Tesla was gonna say 0 before, the things got started. Like, that was gonna be the answer. Um, so you kinda have to, like, you talk with your founder and your leadership about what's going on. Like, hey, here's the situation. Here's what the rules say. Here's what I think, and you're going to be guided by that as well. So that was for us. Like, Kyle's a pretty reasonable person. He's like, that seems to be what it says. Your approach makes sense. So that was kind of where we went.
Interesting. We had Jordan Breslow, who was GC for Ben Horowitz at Opsware on the pod, and famously essentially went through the exercise that you just described of like, here's the rules. And the question there was about stock option dating. And Jordan's conclusion was like, hey, look, I've read this 9 Ways to Sunday. I don't see the interpretation that others are taking being real. And at the time, Ben Horowitz agreed and said, you know what? Cool, don't do that. And famously, of course, Ben now says that that kept him out of jail. Amazing. So put us in that moment, the conversation with Kyle. It sounds almost relatively casual. So you go into this meeting with Kyle. He's a billionaire already at the time. You're looking at the cars, you're in this garage, and you're like, you literally pull up the reg and you're like, all right, disengagement says, a human, clicks on something or whatever it says. I think that means XYZ. Um, was it just that casual? And then how did you adjust over time as the cars were literally on the road?
Yeah. And another note about this is like the report wasn't due, I think it was due like end of the year, but
Mm,
obviously you need to be tracking your eligible disengagements beforehand. So like the law, it went into effect in the spring, I think, and we needed to know what we were doing to track because it was subjective. Like it from like at least at that point, the state of the tech, as well as reading the reg, like it was kind of subjective assessment of like, are you going to get in a like, did you avert a crash by taking over? Was I don't remember the words exactly, but something like that. And simulation at that point, like, wasn't good enough, at least for us, to say like, "Oh, yeah, we definitely avoided a crash." So, like, you actually needed to ask the person taking over, "Do you think that you avoided something?" So we needed to give them the standard. So the standard actually, like, sat with our operators to some extent, for, like, some period of time. And so, yes, this was happening pretty quickly, and, I think it's a big deal. Like, I'm the lawyer in the room, and, like, this is the only thing I've got to go with, and this is important. Kyle has 9 million other things that are very important as well. So I get in the door, I talk about these regs, we talk about it. He becomes familiar with it, starts hearing about it. It's like, okay, like, what are we gonna do? So no, it wasn't like some big thing where we sat in a room and had a big PowerPoint presentation. It was like, here's what I think we should do. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Go make sure that happens.
love that. Any other moments from Cruise just really stand out for you?
um us being acquired certainly stands out as it should. That so as is common, I think like GM had been sniffing around in the context of an investment. Um, they they sent us a term sheet, and I was like pretty it wasn't even like a full on formal term sheet. It was kind of a one pager, but it had this IP term in it, and it was like crazy. It was basically like they're going to own our IP. And so, lawyer hat Matt is like, hey, this like doesn't work. I like that was my input to the term sheet. And this is my side of the story. I'm sure there are other parts of it too, but like that's my hook in the deal is like we went back to GM and said like, hey, this we're interested in an investment. This IP thing doesn't work. Like if you want this kind of IP, you need to buy us. And then GM was like, well, let's talk about that. And that was kind of like, whoa, we did not anticipate that being real. It was kind of a straight comment, like, oh, if you want that, like, you got to buy us. Like, you bought the companies. We are the IP, and you're buying it with an investment. You're going to have to actually buy the company. And they said yes. Um,
Wow, what a
so
story. So folks read term sheets, and as a founder hearing that too, that like because the thing is IP, like I've lived and breathed IP since 2002, but like as a founder, it's not something you think that hard about. So this is like, of course, when you look at an investment term sheet, people are, people on the VC side are telling you, okay, look at, the liquidation preferences, look at the valuation, look at the amount, look at the board terms, all these things. IP might even be on page 2.
yeah, yeah, and like Cruise is maybe so many companies. I imagine IP isn't like the thing. it to some extent, what are you buying with IP with Cruise? We had some patents. Um, at that point, there weren't many. Like they were more buying people and potential, but still, like it was important to us. I think in some companies, maybe your IP isn't the thing, but you're in tech, it should matter. You got to pay attention to that stuff. And it was atypical. Like you're getting a term sheet from a big, 100-year-old company out of Michigan, where in a lot of their other negotiations, like they're negotiating with a supplier, like they just kind of get what they want. So this was different. We're like, hey, we get what we want over here. Like we don't need to be bought. And that position, I think, was impactful to where we went.
A lot of our listeners work on M&A and integrations. Without anything too confidential, you get acquired by Cruise. I gotta imagine, you're 25 folks in a garage. The rules are like you're calling the DMV people, and you're kind of have this ambitious vision to have truly autonomous vehicles. Kyle had been thinking about that since he was a child. Um, What's your how were those so you were there for almost 4 years after that, at GM, right?
Yeah. All told, just under 5. So yeah, it happened really quick. And I'm not a deal attorney, so like I don't know what a normal church sheet looks like at that point. So I was just reading the words and seeing what the words say. Like that that happens to be what you do as a lawyer a lot, is just read the words that other people don't want to read. Um,
Exactly. So this is amazing. This is really like this is great. So our themes on the show is like in-house leadership, and then kind of being the best lawyer you can be. And I think that's right. Is being able to do that. So you get to GM. What was it like? And then any if there's what are you most proud of in the kind of post-integration time period?
yeah. The company is obviously very different, right? Like you have a bunch of like young people wearing flip-flops and shorts, and people from like old line big company in the Midwest. And GM, like the deal was as built out as it could be, but the premise was they're going to let Cruise be Cruise and run itself and grow and build a thing. Like like GM has had history, as many companies have, of buying things and accidentally killing them. So they're trying very hard not to do that. And so the way it was set up was like we, kept our leadership, and essentially there were like ambassadors going either direction. And these were like specially selected people who were supposed to not mess things up. So like I would go to Detroit pretty frequently and try to make them feel like everything was okay. I was an adult in the room, and we have compliance, etc. And then they would send folks who are like the cool kids at GM, and they would come and say, hey, we're trying to help. So that, like, everyone was trying. It was still really hard. Like there's just, when you have a huge company that's public, like there are different things that matter, and there are things you have to care about that aren't the case at a 40-person company. And what was especially unique for us is like this is high risk. Like you have 3,000-pound cars driving around, um, driving themselves around.
And by the
That
way, so I worked on privacy as well, and also they're basically have, what is it, 32 onboard cameras? So they're constantly recording, and there's tell us about the levels of regulation, right? So there's the city, there's the state, there's the federal, there's like 3 federal regulators. I don't remember. Anyway, it's literally like if you had to come up with a more challenging regulatory schema, like I think maybe healthcare, but other than that, I can't think of one.
yeah, yeah, and like a lot of it, the kind of hack, so to speak, that we had was a lot of it was sort of NA, like, oh, doesn't apply. Like, I don't have a driver, so you don't have to license me. Um, and you can take that too far. And so that's going back to that question of like, what do we report for our first disengagements thing? Is you're operating in a space where there aren't answers, and so you work with like where your company is and how you're gonna be, what your culture is, and what you think is gonna work. Like and if your culture is report zero takeovers, you're gonna fight about it, and if that's what you're gonna do, so be it. Like that's the path you
Mhm.
take. So yeah.
It is that's actually been something super interesting just in the development, and we can talk a little bit about AI is, you know, so GCAI, we're legal AI for in-house counsel, and one of the things that very early on occurred to me is that you do actually modulate your advice to the client, right? And so, like, it's a different situation where, you've got Elon Musk out there saying that he wants cowboys as his lawyers, fighting everything all the way to the Chancery Court, literally writing Delaware law. And then you've got others, they're like, well, look, like, is there a benefit to reporting zero disengagements here? Is it a piece of marketing? No, it's a regulatory thing. We're going to be working with these regulators. So really just like adjusting to the client. So how did you hadn't been in house before? Was it just like a deep kind of like how did you learn that? Was it just from this like deep trust with Kyle? Did you I think you and I have talked about you read Ben Heinemann's book, you've done other things like that. What, the sort of learning on the job and becoming great at that. How did you do it?
Wasn't intentional. That like the notion I remember, so it was very like there's this group called Tech GC,
Mhm.
which is a group of general counsels of tech companies, and it was brand new. And so when I first started, big change is like you're the only lawyer. No one cares about the law. Like they all have things to do, and they're like, law is this thing that they don't understand. They're like, what is the rule about water running through my neighbor's yard? And you're like, I have no idea, but they think you do. It's that experience. And, there are these, as a lawyer, like I care about the legal issues. I find them interesting and I'm used to being around a bunch of lawyers and talking about them. Now, like you don't have a colleague, so to speak, in that sense. Um, so Tech GC was very useful just to like have a space where I could go and people would say like, oh, here's, you need to have a employee handbook. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Handbook. That sounds good. So that was helpful. And then with regard to product counseling, it was kind of a new concept at the time. I don't even know that it was called that.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
it was
right.
more,
Like ChatGPT and kind of Google was calling them product counsel. I was one of the first at Amazon to have that title. But I think these, like, regulated industries where you're doing something new, that's where it gets super interesting because you can affect the development, right? So, like, you're literally in there working on, like, dashboards and stuff, back to the reporting example, or simulations, or, like, a pretty deep partnership on with the operators and the product folks, right, Matt?
yeah, I mean, it was fundamental for recruit. Like, I think that's why, many startups don't hire a lawyer until pretty far in. Like Kyle, saw that pretty early. It was like, okay, you're going to need this. So yeah, we were hand in hand. Like another big piece was how do the cars drive? So we need to know the rules of the road. And all of us pass our driver's license tests and all that. But we actually went through the motor vehicle code in California and like mapped out all the rules and then worked with engineers to say, hey, what does this mean? Like a good one that I always think about is like when you're turning right and there's like an intermediate. So you're driving down the street and there's a Burger King entrance, but then you actually are turning right on the real street that's past the Burger King. When do you turn on your blinker? Because you're supposed to turn on your blinker 200 feet before, but there's a Burger King entrance. Like, how do I? So that's not clear in the motor vehicle code. Um, our answer is like turn it on 200 feet before, even though you're going to go past the entrance to the Burger King and
Burger
go to the
King.
real
So
street.
you've got people thinking that your AV is stopping for burgers when
Yeah,
in fact
yeah,
it's turning right on El Camino or
yeah.
whatever.
We
Okay.
decided like the earlier is better. Um,
It is fascinating. I mean, and that actually was, like, really fun, like, the intellectual aspects of it. I mean, I really did I miss it sometimes, actually, now that I'm a founder, is I actually miss that. And, it is definitely um for my lawyers, like, what I look for in both my outside counsel and in our team in-house is, like, that ability to think hard about something so that I know someone's thinking hard about it, and then they can, like, make the recommendation and use their judgment to me. But, yeah, I wish I still I miss it too. I'm like you.
yeah, I get that. Like the transition from being, lawyer to founder. Yeah, I very much miss that piece of the work. Although I'm still doing the legal work here, but
Oh, good
it's
stuff.
different.
Alright, well, let's talk about it. So tell us about your so when did you left Cruise and and you decided to found a golf company. Okay, so, like, that's just wild. So tell us, like, what was going through your head. I'm assuming you took a little bit of a break, and then tell us what happened.
Yeah, no breaks, no breaks.
No breaks. That's
Not
the
like
Midwest
intentionally. So I had
lawyer.
a small, but that's not true. I had a small break after cruise. I actually went in house to a healthcare company called Forward for a little bit. Kind of the idea was similar. It was like, all right, we're going to change healthcare and all this stuff. Very, very difficult to do. And I think was more on changing society first, which is also very difficult to do. I don't think you can do that intentionally. So anyway, was at Forward at the time, and my another friend of mine, Adil, um, he has started and sold a few companies. We went to college together, and he had recently sold his company and picked up golf. I can golf. Can ask some people at Latham, and they would tell you I can't. I once went out with the partners and like couldn't hit the ball, and it was like I had pretty good status at the firm, and then I had not good status. Um, so anyway, I was not recruited for my golf abilities. Um, but yeah, he's a friend of mine. He's like, oh, we gotta start this. We gotta do this thing. He got into golf. The pandemic hit. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't even play golf, which in retrospect is like one of the few activities you should have been able to do. But nobody knew at the time. So he was like, I need to feed this bug. What can I do? I'm going to put a simulator in my house. Um, they live in San Francisco. They have children. And that was a non-starter because it would have taken a kid's room. He lives like off of Geary, and on Geary, there's a bunch of trailers that park on the side of the road, like out west.
Mhm.
He was like, why don't I just put this simulator in a trailer? The like the trick is that to swing a golf club, you need a decent amount of width. The legal road width in the US is like 8.5 feet. And that's not enough to swing a golf club comfortably. So a deal figured out and patented, which is, keeps my legal hat on, um, a system to make a trailer bigger to play golf inside. So he made one for himself. He had it, it was a real
Like,
thing.
I literally, when you told me you were doing this, golf in a box, I was kind of like, that's wild. But actually, knowledge of the roadways, it sounds like, and of California motor law is actually sounds kind of relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. So he did this pre me. So he figured that out on his own. Like, hey, regular width isn't enough. How do I make this wider, but still be able to drive down the road legally? So he figured that all out, built one, and he was like, people keep like knocking on the door and asking me what this thing is, and I think we should make it a business. So that was, it took me a few like I had to get Forward in a good place where I could leave and not like leave them hanging. But then joined to make it a real company. Um, and that was the summer of 2021.
Wow. Love that. So how so you went from law firm lawyer to clerk at the federal courts to startup GC to another startup GC and now through to founder. Um what was the transition to founder like? And, obviously you handled the legal stuff, but how's that been?
It has been hard. So like I prefer being a lawyer. It's it's easier in a sense. Like you have a much narrower scope, right? You only have to look to be a good GC, you need to care about the business side and whatnot. But like your role is to advise on legal issues in the context of the business. As a founder, your role is to like make the best decision, period. Um, and and so like it's pretty weird to leave legal issues sitting because you only have so much time, resources, whatever, to deal with the things that are more priority. And as a lawyer, like, that's driving, that's pretty tough. So it's also, I like doing the legal work more. Like the issues that Cruise or that Dryvebox has, 98% of them are not legal. And, I spent 98% of my time dealing with non-legal issues. I actually enjoy this 2% the most. It gives me the most intellectual satisfaction or what have you. But I don't get to do that because that's not the most important thing to the company. Um,
It is interesting because I definitely, I had someone when I became a founder, someone, and I assume you share this view from having us having worked together. said something effective like, Cecilia, you were never really a lawyer. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
I
I
was,
was
yeah,
for
for sure.
20 years. Like, what the hell? So much schooling. But I think constitutionally, I always felt the reverse about you, Matt. I really did feel you were a lawyer. And we would joke and you said, okay, the people in the flip flops and whatever. But I remember thinking, I think you had all right, I hope I don't embarrass you too much, but I feel like you had pleated pants, which at the time they were not in. Now I think they have come back in, so you were kind of, like, inadvertently before your time, but at the time, it was like, okay, he's wearing, like, his, like, federal clerk pants to, like, this startup, and
Yeah.
we're like, "Well, he's just a lawyer's lawyer." And we would discuss, among your team because you grew a decent sized team. You had 30 people, 40 people, whatever, and we would talk about that. And it actually gave me comfort because I think you're right. In that environment in Cruise, you needed a lawyer's lawyer. So you went from lawyer's lawyer to founder. So how do you scratch the itch on the lawyer side? Do you read John Grisham on the weekend? Do you still read opinions? What do you do?
I do actually, but I will correct the record. They were not pleated, flat front, flat front. Um, but yeah, I would wear like a button down shirt and slacks at Cruise every day. Probably like unconsciously for some like to give some legitimacy because I was like, I don't know, 29 years old when I started there, and I had legitimacy with the people who worked there because they're 22 for the most part, but more externally, I guess. And that, I became a person that people could go to and know that I wasn't the same as everyone else who worked there. Um, so that was very intentional. The one t-shirt I wore was Cruise t-shirts, so I wear Cruise t-shirts with slacks. Um, but yes. Uh, so anyway, like how do I scratch the itch now? I still read legal news. And being an ex antitrust lawyer, like it's ever present. So we're seeing some good stuff now with some mergers that are proposed. And I do read opinions on occasion, stuff that's interesting. Trying to think of the last one I read. A lot of stuff that's coming out of the current administration is just like pretty
Pretty
new
wild.
movements. Getting to see how courts are attacking those things has been fun to watch. But from a at Dryvebox, my legal work has gone up because I mentioned we have some patents, so we're actually in some patent litigation. So that has been
Wow,
really
patent
busy.
litigation. Okay, yeah, I
Yeah,
will say patent litigation as a startup GC or as a founder or any kind of IP litigation, it is not good. Like, I
don't do
do
it.
not like
Don't do
it.
it.
It is
Don't
just
do it.
as an IP litigator, like, I love the litigation part of it, but being on the client side, we had a trademark matter at one of my companies, and the entire exec team got deposed. It was, I think it's a public matter, but it was absolute garbage. Like, it literally was like there was no likelihood of confusion. Like, I feel very, very strongly about it. It was a classic, like, and the person would say this, and this is in the public record. That it was a lot of egos involved, and just oh god, it was like I think I'm much more pragmatic now. So I guess like now that you're on the founder side, like what's your advice for GCs helping founders with IP litigation or any other kind of litigation?
Yeah, like it is much more than like we wrote it down on paper. It was like, this is going to be really expensive. This is going to suck up our time. And it's going to be like mentally, it's going to be it's going to be emotionally tolling. You can write that down. You still won't like grasp it fully. Um, and I think I could be accused of being like a litigation avoider. Despite the fact that you mentioned this, I love litigate. Like that is,
It
I
is fun,
really enjoy
it's
that. Like,
fun, like, it's like we were a little kid, you're like, "I'm gonna go to court, I'm gonna write briefs, and this is such a good
yeah,
argument, and I'm gonna tell a narrative," and all these things, but the actual, like, underlying thing is, like, move on, do something else, like, it literally, like, my reaction half the time now is, like, "Get a life," like,
yeah, like the business practicalities of it, it doesn't make sense. It almost never makes sense. In our case, like this is the foundational thing for what our product is. So I'm a plaintiff, which again, like theoretically should be fun. And as our lawyer, I would love it. The case, it's like a pretty interesting
I
matter.
believe it. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
I wrote a cease and desist letter one time, and the recipient apologized. I was like, "This is amazing. This is so
yeah.
fun. Please leave us
Um,
alone, scary lawyer lady."
we get a lot now where ChatGPT copies our website. Someone makes a golf company and they
Mm.
have like our same text. And I write them a nice letter. I'm like, hey, we're flattered because I wrote the copy.
Got it.
And that's what I get to do. Like as the ex lawyer, as a founder, like I do all the words. So when we do words, Matt does the words. Sometimes there's too many, and then the deal does a good job cutting them down, but I usually start. Anyway, so yeah, like they say, "Oh, like I had no idea. I just put it into ChatGPT. Like, give me a good thing about about golf being inspiring," and it uses the words from our website. So we say, "Hey, like you should come up with your own stuff." Thanks, and they do.
I love that. I love that. So you said something interesting. You said, I'm a lawyer, lawyers do the words. And I think that's actually super fascinating to link to AI. So you and I have talked about AI before, and you mentioned something very insightful, which is that a lot of the fears around autonomous vehicles are similarly being applied to now, LLMs and this like fear of jobs going away and truck drivers and what have you. Um, what's your take on AI? So you are literally, or you lived in San Francisco, you're part of the kind of Y Combinator folks, which of course, Sam Altman came from there. You probably know Sam. What what's Matt's take on AI? And then we'll talk about AI and legal.
I take on AI like this is a very broad question. I think it's wonderful. I think it's so drastically changed like how people do things, myself included. It is there's some study, I haven't read it, about how like people stop using their brains when they're using AI. Um, and I sh again, I haven't read it, so I can't say, but I think about that snapshot when I use AI, because I use it very frequently just to like answer questions.
Hmm.
Um, and I think people will use their brains in different ways. So now I'm thinking of more questions and because I can get answers more quickly. But before, like I would have had to research, how like how sump pumps will result in subterranean liquefaction underneath my basement. It's been raining a bunch. I've been running a sump pump, and I'm like, huh, should I drain it a lot or a little? And I could have read, five different things about that, and now I just kind of got the answer. But I can ask more things and learn more. So I'm actually like learning more in less time. So I think that is pretty cool. And the impacts to society and business and what we do as humans, like they're unfathomable to me, but they're big.
I love it. I love it. Do you still on the AI uh theme when you see, so now obviously Waymo has autonomous vehicles all around the city. They've come to Burlingame, my town. Do you still, like, get the chills or notice when there's no driver in the car?
I don't.
You
It's
don't.
like,
It's commonplace for you now.
yeah, I think a lot of people experience this, like getting in a self-driving car is such a big thing. Like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. And they got their cameras out and you're in the car for 2 minutes and you're like, well, works. It's kind of boring. I feel good. Like,
I love that.
so
I love
yeah,
that.
I think the sentiment that I still have occasionally is like, God, like Cruise, could have been us, should have been there. But it is really cool to see that dream be a reality, whether it was us or someone else. Like we knew it was going to happen and it is happening and it's awesome. So yeah,
I love that. Wow. All right, let's talk a little bit more about leadership. So, hiring and team dynamics. So, you have done. I still remember when I interviewed with you to take the role. It was, I believe, it might have been your first paternity leave, possibly, or maybe it was a holiday, something. And you told me at the time, you said, "Hey, there is no vacation from hiring. Hiring is the most important thing. I will take an interview, anywhere, anytime." At the time, I'm not sure I quite fully understood that. I mean, obviously, I was like, "Oh, this is just a guy that works hard," which of course you are. But now as a founder, it really is like it's been shocking to me. One of the most shocking things is how important hiring is and how hard it is. And so I guess on that note, what is your advice for hiring? And any other kind of theories or hot takes you have on hiring and on people to work with?
I wish I had something like I haven't figured it out. It's I've hired a lot of people. I have not figured out like the thing that guarantees success. So, my gut reaction is like whatever that phrase is, hire fast, fire fast, because you just need to like get to the right person. That's very hard to actually do in real life. I don't have the guts for it. So I can say that, but I don't actually live it myself. But what I can say is, um, on the flip side, it's very apparent pretty quickly who's really good and who's not good. And I mentioned like I don't have the guts to hire fast, fire fast because you've heard this phrase before too. Like the moment you let someone go who you should have let go like a long time ago, you realize it. That holds true for me too. Like when you think they're not the right person, you're right, and don't delay it. So on hiring, do your best. Yeah, listen to podcasts with people who have better advice than me on that one. That's what I would say.
Good stuff. All right. You've said before something that with two types of employees, those who do what they're told and those who do what they think should be done. Um, why are both valuable? And I presume you've managed both. What are your tips?
Yeah, yeah. So the they're recognizing that these are like generalizations and whatnot. I think there's two types of people. So people who like they will do what they're told. You tell them to do a thing, they're going to do it. And they can be there's people who are really good at doing that thing and people who aren't. And so that's the spectrum there. And then there's people who like are going to go figure out what to do and they will do it. They're both useful because there are times like you just need someone, you need people to do things that need to be done and need to be told. You know what the task is, you just need people to do it. And it's not even about like, it's not a this person is better than that person. Like you need them both, they're both good. And if you have a person from category B and you tell them to do a thing, they're going to do it differently than you need it done. And it's like unnecessary. So the like, they shouldn't cross. But then there are also a lot of times where you're actually not sure what needs to be done, or you're thinking about what needs to be done over here, and you need someone else thinking about what needs to be done over there. And so if you have a person from category A who's trying to fill in that space, they won't succeed at it. Like they will try, or they're a good employee, they'll try. And I've seen this a lot. Like they're trying, it's just not their nature. They need guidance. They need someone to tell them what to do, and then they'll like knock it out of the park. Yeah, that's I think there's those two types of people. It's important to know what you need when you're hiring. A lot of times you think you need B, but you actually need A, and vice versa. Um, Early on in a startup, you often need more B. Um, but within those, there's good and bad. So, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely also like it, what you need also is probably going to change too, right? So for us, we've gone from, seed to A to B very quickly from 0 to 1,200 customers. And, servicing 1,200 customers is different than servicing 10 or whatever it is. And so, yeah, it is definitely, and it is, I don't know, I'm with you that it just has been like shocking to me that how hard that part is. Like the substance, the law or the sales or the marketing or whatever it is, like that's words. We're good at that. But yeah, it's that's been a thing. So you do also though, I remember this from working on your team, have a really strong commitment to excellence and a view that like excellence can come from anywhere, lawyers, non-lawyers, whoever it is. Any good stories with that? Anything either at Cruise or since, surprise you that somebody maybe was not a lawyer thought of an elegant solution or anything, any stories to share?
let me think about that first. I will say, like, more often than not, non-lawyers come up with good solutions to legal problems, and not in the sense of I'm product counseling with you and we're working on an issue with your product. More like, hey, I'm a lawyer. I'm sitting down at the lunch table with you and I'm going to tell you about what I'm doing. And then they're like, oh, why don't you just do this? I think often lawyers, like we're trained, think by example, analogize to what has happened in the past. And the classic tech thing is like, oh, first principles and all that. I try not to get too into first principles, but it is nice. Maybe fresh take is another one. Again, this can get you in trouble when you're like, oh, just do a fresh take and forget about laws and come up with it the first time. But it is uh, you get different perspectives when you talk to people who aren't in law, and that often helps you solve your problems. Specific examples or commitments to excellence, like actually, yeah, going back to takeovers. So this was more practical, but like when we first started, we had like a manual way of tracking our takeovers. And one of the engineers, like, because we had to, going back to product counseling, this was fundamental to the thing. Like, we had to build that into the process for how we were doing driving and training drivers. Um, One of the engineers was like, he was relatively new, and this is one of those people who's like really good, and you can tell immediately because he's doing his normal job, and then he like at lunch heard me talking about this. It was like, this is insane. Like use technology. So he built a thing that would drop a pin for like whenever there had been a takeover, and it would immediately take a note and take all the stats. And like that was the beginnings of us not doing this manually. And he did it in like an hour. Like the next day, he's like, "Hey, Matt, I made this thing. Come check it out." And my mind was blown. I was like, "Wow, you've just made it
Yeah,
so
that
much
keeps
better." Like,
That's awesome. Well, and I actually, for me, that's been one of the most fun things about AI is that as lawyers now, we have the power to create systems like that. And, literally like creating a playbook. So we're launching basically playbooks here where it's essentially checks that you can run against a contract. Because what do you do as in compliance? You run checks, right? You're looking at a piece of marketing, make sure that it doesn't do this, this, and this. And AI is objectively better at that than most humans. And so I've been just like the power of almost like creation of being able to be creative in that way that we have that now as lawyers. I love it. But that is an excellent story. And it sounds like, and then you worked with this engineer for years later, then it sounds like too.
yeah, yeah. I would try to grab him. Like he very quickly got grabbed for more important big projects. But like every once in a while, I would go and I'd talk to him like, "Hey, you have any good ideas for this?" Because there's two parts. One is AI. I agree. Like it gives us the ability to build a thing. And that is a new thinking, like a new way of thinking for a lawyer. It is not just like what is, as a product counsel, you're supposed to like manifest your advice. Like you're working with engineers to build the thing to make it work.
Hmm.
Now, actually, it's like, no, just go build your own thing to make it work. Um, that turning that part of your brain on of like, okay, not only do I understand what the rule is and how I think it should apply in the product, like how do I build it? So like that's kind of cool.
I love that. I absolutely love that. All right, let's go to a lightning round. So, is there anything about being a general counsel or that is a myth that you would want to debunk?
Hmm. Gosh, I'm thinking through a lot of different things. I think this is a bit of a contrarian take, but like the there's this big push in legal to say like, hey, we're part of the business. We are like we're as much in the business as you are. I think that has that can be taken too far. And you don't see it happening in practice. You just see it in words. It's like lawyers want to pitch themselves as like, no, I'm a business person too. Um, like you aren't. You're there not to be. You still need to help the business, but like you aren't. So the like I was not a business person at Cruise. Um,
Yeah. Well, you had the flat front pants, right? I'm just kidding.
yeah.
No, I actually
Um,
think it's true, and you know what, for me, I think that's good advice actually because for me, I deciding to become a founder, part of it was, and I worked for you and I had a great time working for you. Incredibly impactful year of my career, fascinating issues, one of the best lawyer jobs I've ever had easily. But ultimately, I left to be a GC partly because as a GC, I think you get more of that permission to be the business person. And ultimately, for me, also, the decision in my career to become a founder was that the lawyer side for me, like I hadn't like, it wasn't deep enough, and playing that role for me wasn't the right one. So, like, but now, just like that conversation that, that I mentioned that, like, I want my lawyers to be thinking deeply about the law, particularly where it's a big thing, in a funding round, when we have a term sheet, all these situations where I wanna be protected. So I think that's a great contrarian take. That being said, of course, here at GCAI, we're really big, move the business forward, business accelerators,
yeah, yeah.
do the creation, but I think if you can actually do both, like that advice to manifest your product counsel is manifest your advice, like, oh my gosh, that's gonna be the clip of this show. So good advice. I love that, Matt. Awesome. What about a book, idea, or mentor that's shaped you?
Yeah, I have a couple mentors. Mentor is a broad term. One is my judge. I like sucked at writing. I was terrible at writing. Yeah, I just
Matt is
hadn't ever
surprised
really
if
been
you're
trained.
listening to this. I am making like I got my eyebrows raised because Matt is an excellent writer.
So I came out of law school not really ever having been trained well. Like I took legal research and writing 1 a year. It was the worst grade I got in law school. And like I chalked that up to like being busy or whatever. But no, it turns out I just wasn't very good at writing. And as a first, second year associate, like you don't do a lot of writing, at least at the time you didn't. And I had gotten some opportunities to do some, and like a partner like kindly brought me in. And he was like, "Matt, this is really bad. Like this is
Oh,
not good.
no.
You can't." He's like, "What you're trying to convey, you want to convince someone of this argument. I'm reading this and I don't even understand what's happening." It was like, that was a tough day. So I chalked that up. The person's name was Matt, and he just like got real with me and said, "Hey, like this isn't good. You gotta." And then it just so happened that like that was pretty close to right before I went to clerk, and then I went to clerk and just got smoked. Like my judge just every day was working on me. Like, Matt, this is how you convey things clearly. Like, stop using so many words. Just help people understand. So those two people, my judge, and then the like kick in the pants I got from that one partner, um, really impacted my abilities and like my mind of just like thinking, oh, I'm some smart person. Like, no, the craft of being a lawyer, at least in that context, is writing. And you weren't doing a very good job of it. You're not conveying ideas well. People are not understanding what you're saying. So
I love
those
that.
those two folks.
Wow, this has been so much fun, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people follow what you're building or try out Dryvebox?
Yeah. Dryvebox is all over. So we're actually in the UK as well. So we launched in the UK this summer. We're in there's 50 of them now. So most major cities
Oh,
in yeah,
I remember when you had one. That's incredible. Congratulations.
yeah.
Wow. So
Um,
it's super fun. It's literally like a trailer. You go in and play golf. They do parties. It's kind of like, there's these like they have those trailers where you can play Xbox, but this is golf. So
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Can't wait. Next GCA offsite done.
yeah. Have us out. Yeah, so we do events all over the place. There's 50 of them, so pretty much anywhere in the US, continental US. There's one going to Hawaii soon. So we're everywhere. Drivebox.com and we'll show up.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me, Matt.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
That was my conversation with Matt Gipple, a former general counsel turned founder who shows what it's like to move from advising to building with judgment and clarity. Incredible stories. He talked about manifesting. I am just so excited to have done this episode. Follow CZ and Friends wherever you get your podcasts to learn how legal teams are using AI to work smarter and lead with impact and lean into the lawyer side. Visit gc.ai. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.